Okay, now we're going to go into plant-like protists. Plant-like protists are able to obtain their energy through photosynthesis. There's a huge wide variety of these called phytoplankton and algae. They are a little bit different. Algae was once considered to be a plant, and so these ones are able to change just a little bit because we did once consider all the organisms in the plant-like protists to be plants. And so there's a wide variety of photosynthetic pigments and places in which they can live. So let's talk about diatoms. Diatoms are really cool. They have little box-like structures or hard double shells, and they are photosynthetic. The cool thing is they come into all these really neat shapes. And so these diatoms are really cool because they do come into all these fun little shapes. They are diploid. They reproduce asexually. They have very small generations in which they shed their shells, and they're able to reproduce sexually. However, when they shed their shells, tongue twister, they're kind of exposed, and so they become very easy for predators to eat. And so these are found in salt water. You also found in fresh water, but most commonly in salt, and they come in these really cool shapes that you see here. Then we have euglenoids. Euglenoids are a little bit neat because they're not only are they photosynthetic, but they're also mobile, and so they have flagellum. So they're kind of like this bridge species between the animals and plants. Some are heterotrophic, but all are photosynthetic, which means they may have to take in other nutrients, but they can still get most of their nutrients from light itself. So they are light sensitive. So if you would happen to know if you have euglenoids, if you take a sample of water and it's really dark and you put a light source at one end, they'll actually come towards the light source. And so that part is really kind of cool. But these euglenoids are really neat because they do have flagellum and they do kind of bridge that evolutionary gap. Then we have Dinoflagellates. Dinoflagellates are unicellular. They typically have two flagellum, and they'll spin like a top through the water, which is really cool. Most are photosynthetic, but there are some dinoflagellates that are heterotrophic. They're still put into this classification because most of them are photosynthetic, even if we have these few. They have this protective coating called a silica, and it's the same consistency as silica sand. And so these flagellates are able to take these two flagellum and they're able to spin them around the circular groove, and then they spin like a top through the water, and it's really kind of neat to see. Then we go into our algae. And so algae is really important to most ecologies because it is a huge food source. These are multicellular. They're typically found in warm waters of oceans, and they'll absorb the blue light, and so that's why we see them as red. They are really important for the formation of coral reefs. Without red algae, coral doesn't have all the nutrients it needs, and so it wouldn't, those coral reefs won't grow. So they're really important to be there. Then we also have brown algae. Brown algae is really common, and it's found in the cooler oceans. So we'll find them up by Alaska, would be an example. And they form these huge forms called kelp. Now we harvest kelp and actually use it for a ton of foods. Like we'll put kelp into ice cream. Algae is an ice cream. We'll use it for makeup products. We'll also use it to make sushi. And they'll actually have seaweed wraps. And so kelp is one of those things that's harvested from there. Kelp can be very, very long and has a huge root, which isn't really a root. It's called a holdfast. It's similar to a root. Its stipe, which is its stem, kind of looks more branchy than like a stem on like a green plant, more like a stem on a rose. It has leaf-like structures, which we call blades, which are similar because we call them blades on regular plants. And then the algae will have only one type of tissue with more, there's only one algae with more than one tissue type. So with this, we don't see our complex organ systems in here, but we'll have tissues. The reason this was once classified as a plant because it is photosynthetic. It has these same, like a stem, a root structure, and these blades or leaves. And so it looks similar to what we know as plants, but now we know that they are, after genetic information, they got moved over to kingdom Protista. But kelp is the most common. Then we have green algae. Green algae is the most diverse. It is also a huge food source for a lot of marine organisms. And so one of the major ones is plankton. And so it forms a symbiotic relationship with other organisms. It's typically photosynthetic. It is usually green because it has chlorophyll A and B. It contains and stores starches. It has the cellulose walls, like, you know, your cell wall. It has a lot of the same similar structures as what we know as our true plants. However, because it lacks complex tissue layers, it is classified as Protista. Plants are pretty complex. They have things like xylem and phloem. They have a pith. They have these portions to it that allow them to have like an organ system like us. We don't see that in algae. Also with genetic testing, we found that they don't classify the same. So they got moved over, even though green algae is really the evolutionary step to our true plants. The last one is known as fungus-like protists. Fungus-like protists are typically our molds. They're able to absorb their nutrients from the environment. And then they also release spores. One thing that's really cool about these protists, because they are similar to our fungus, we have some mushrooms that are able to grow really, really big, and then when you come in contact and these spores spread out everywhere. That's kind of what fungus-like protists do. They don't actually have to come in contact with anything. They just release these spores constantly, and so they're kind of dangerous to people. Okay, so one of them is called what we know as a water mold. This is parasitic. And so what a water mold is it, actually what we call ick in our plants. And so it's a pretty common parasite in aquariums. And so it happens because you have a temperature change in there, and so it will actually go through and attach to that organism and start to break it down even before it's dead, and then we'll continue breaking it down until it's completely decayed out. Now, it is also causing the famine in Ireland for the potato famine. Now, this is a different type of water mold, but basically what happens is it attached to the potato and it just started to break it down in the ground, so then they picked it out. They're all just rotten and oozing and disgusting. And so those are going to be your water molds. They're pretty common in any moist soil. And so you don't want your soil to be moist for too long because you see water molds and growing. And plants don't have an immune system, so not only will they affect potatoes, but they affect grapes, corn, lettuce, all of these types of plants, and they're really typical in aquariums as well. Then we have downy molds, and downy molds are also common in aquariums. These are similar to our water molds and almost wiped out the entire French wine industry in the late 1800s. They are multicellular, they resemble fungus, they'll grow on the outside, and they occur when it is moist. They're most common in grapes or strawberries, anything that will grow on a vine, and also in corn. And so these become really kind of problematic if you have a wet year for them. Then we have slime molds. Slime molds are a fungus-like protists that are commonly found in rotting logs. However, they can be found in other places. Basically, they are very slow to search out and break down dead or decaying matter, so they're great to produce soil. In normal conditions, they are typically single-celled amoeboids. However, they can become multicellular or plasmoids, and then will form a slime over top of a surface or membrane. They also helped researchers to understand the interaction between how cytoplasm can move within a cell, because they have they secrete this mass that will allow them to slide almost along a surface. And when you find them, the most common way that you would find them in nature is you would find a piece of wood or a log and have what looks like this blob-like mass, which we have termed as dog vomit. It's actually a type of slime mold, growing across it. And this slime mold, it produces so much cytoplasm that the mass can actually slide along and engulf any of the decaying matter it moves over. So it's really kind of neat that it can do that. But it does kind of look like dog vomit if you want to look up dog vomit slime molds. Then we have some infections. So protists can infect human and cause diseases. And so it becomes, most of these are going to be your animal-like protists. And so the one that's, I find that just absolutely disgusting is amoeboid dysentery. Dysentery, this is a diarrhea illness. It causes explosive diarrhea, and it can go on for a long time, and if not treated, it can actually kill you. And it kills you because you become dehydrated. We also have toxoplasmosis. This is basically something that you can get by eating uncooked meats. It's also can spread through cat feces. And so pregnant women are actually not supposed to clean litter boxes because they can come in contact with this protist, and it actually causes a lot of damage. Now, in a normal person, you're fine. So if, like, you would clean your kitty cat's litter box and you're pregnant, it's not going to hurt you, ladies, but it's going to hurt your unborn baby. And so the unborn fetus can actually have brain damage, eye problems, nerve damage. There's a lot of problems that can come along with it. And so, but we don't see it actually hurting the adult, it hurts the fetus. And then we have granita, which is a diarrhea, which happens with intense cramps, and it can last from 2 to 6 weeks. And we're not seeing that a lot of medications are effective for it. Typically, you get this disease and amoeboid dysentery by drinking contaminated water sources, which will then make you super ill. So, we also have trichomonas, which is an STD in the United States. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It's a flagellate that will actually swim and cause some medical problems. It can be treated through medication, though, so, and it doesn't cause diarrhea. Crito, this is also going to be found in your contaminated water and uncooked. It will cause a dysentery disease as well. And then the Chagas disease, this is caused by what we know as the kissing bug, and it can cause heart disease, heart failure, abnormal heart rate, enlarged esophagus, problems with your intestinal tract. It can cause some nasty stuff to happen within you. Now, with this, protists are actually kind of important for our environment because they produce oxygen. They're able to cycle nutrients. They're a really important portion to the food web. However, they can cause things like algae blooms, which we know can eradicate a water source because all the algae goes up, fish all die afterwards. And it has typically a symbiotic relationship with other organisms. We use protists a lot actually in industry, and we don't even know it. Plantlike Protists is actually used for food sources. Ice cream, salad dressing, gelatin capsules. Diatoms are actually found in things like toothpaste. What? And we'll find them as coloring in our railroad paints as well. So you are going to actually work tomorrow in groups of 2 and one group of 3 to make protist presentations that you will present on Friday.